Thank you very much, Ambassador. In a nutshell, I just wanted to say that I'm senior enough / old enough. That was let's say, the nutshell, the synthesis of his presentation, which means that, yes, I got some experience, and being impatient by character, I've also learned how to manage a little bit my impatience and try to become as diplomatic as possible. I don't think I've reached a lot of success in this endeavor, but I'm still trying. Anyhow, first of all, I really want to thank you very much, and the IE in particular, for organizing this discussion in Farnesina, and I welcome you even if you started yesterday, but I really hope that you found yourself at home, and you will continue to do so. Going through the program of your discussion, all topics are really interesting, but I'd like to focus out of responsibility on one specific aspect of what you have been discussing. Definitely the future of global governance is one of the most crucial issues that the international community is called to face. This is clear. And without entering in so many details of all the single questions that you dealt during the conference, I would just make a few considerations of what I think Europe can provide in this endeavor towards a global governance. Now, what we see now, if you look around, is that from Europe to the Middle East, from Asia down to the poorest region of Africa, we are witnessing a proliferation of crises. Fragmented crises, different kind of crises, if you want to, economic, financial, political, humanitarian crisis, but also sometimes I think we feel also, I see some crisis of values, and very often a crisis of confidence among actors operating on the international stage. And in the meanwhile, what we are seeing also is a frantic racing, multiplying new aggregation on poles that this proliferation doesn't seem to finish. We move from G8 to G13, G20, Mediterranean Union, 5+5, BRICS, Asian, and so on and so forth. All this trying to contribute to something, but for the moment, the overall framework is not so clear, and it's fragmenting even more so, all in a good faith, of course, but we are not there of what we wanted to achieve. So, therefore, the international scenario is becoming highly complex, and also international power is changing face. It's clear that not only it's distributed among multiple actors, or also because non-state actors are increasing their role here and there, and not always in the positive sense. So it's not only a fragmentation among member states, it's a fragmentation in the region, subject, you have economic cooperation, you have other organizations who have a more ambitious approach, but all in all, to put all this online is not so easy. So in addition to the traditional powers, there are new emerging actors, as everybody knows, which are starting to project their power in foreign policy, and as a consequence, it's becoming more and more difficult to lay down shared rules aimed at strengthening the global governance. In all this, there is the European Union, on which I would like to spend a few words, underlying the weakness, but also the value and the ambition, and what we could do moving forward. For instance, I don't want to be too theoretical, so I would like to stress maybe two examples where we have been active that underpin, in my opinion, the difficulties, and so, in my opinion, also gives the reason why we have to go forward in really building a European political union. That is the major contribution I think we can give to the global governance. Take Syria. Syria, for instance, is a crisis that is very important for Europe. It's dear to us. For a country as Italy, for instance, it's of utmost importance, coupled with the one in Libya or Egypt, let's say all the South Mediterranean. But if I take, I would like to take two examples. One is Syria and one is Egypt. Syria, we strived, or Europe strived in the last 2 years before getting a consensus on how to react or how to deal with the Syrian crisis. And even recently, we had a different approach among European Union's member states. For instance, on arming the rebels, that has been one of the biggest split in our discussion at 28, with some countries that wanted to. There was a common position on the decision of not providing arms to the rebels, but the debate came to a point in which this common position basically was broken, and in fact, the responsibility was left to every member state, but with a practical result that, first of all, an important part of a European position, no arms to the rebels, was broken in a sort of institutional victim, if I can express myself in this way, but then without being able to provide the practical consequences of this decision, due to the fact that, for instance, UK couldn't implement the decision because of the block of their own parliament, and France was not willing to go it alone. So we broke a consensus or a policy without really practical consequences. Then we had another discussion, which we found at the end a very difficult agreement on the blacklisting of Hezbollah for many other reasons. And then only recently at Vilnius last week, we managed, after a lot of efforts, to find a common position of the European Union on the Syrian crisis, even after other member states deciding on their own where they wanted to go. And now the situation is that, as you see, just opening the newspaper, the situation is evolving in a different way. But the position that we had since the beginning, we as Italian government, that a viable multilateral system based on the UN is a priority interest even for you on the global governance. And yes, it is paralyzed. Yes, it is weak, but that is not a good reason to kill it even more. That could be a good reason to strengthen it as much as possible. So that is, but if you take Egypt, for instance, is a different case. On Egypt, we really had a common position. We negotiated on one voice, as we used to say. Cathy Ashton was mandated by all the member states to negotiate to avoid the crackdown that then at the end took place in August 15, but that we had a common position. But we failed in the sense that the negotiation failed, in the sense that Egyptians decided to choose other allies or other actors or other, let's say. So we have two examples that proves to us that and we failed in Egypt not because we were late, not because we were slow, not because we were not united, but it failed simply because, and we were negotiating with the US friends and others, but it failed because let's say, the power in the region had changed. And when we talk a multipolar world, for instance, we are used to talk to BRICS, but just mentioning only the BRICS, we forget that there are other regional powers in the Mediterranean particularly, who are not officially BRICS, but who are becoming more and more important out of unlimited, for instance, financial resources, out of natural resources, out of assets. Many of them, who makes them relevant. On top of that, when I was thinking and mentioning that the fragmenting of the world, you see it also on the Muslim world. We are faced with the traditional Sunni Shia, let's say, confrontation, but we have a new element which is complicating things, which is the fragmentation and fight inside the Sunni family, with all the implication that brings about. It's not only Sunni Shia, we were, quote unquote, used to it, but now you have a new element, which is the fight inside the Sunni family for geopolitical positioning, for many reasons. You have from one side Turkey plus Qatar, and from the other side you have Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Emirates. With all the implication that means with in their connection with more extremist group, be it Al-Qaeda, jihadist, or the other part, which is the Salafi. And you can see this in all the Mediterranean. I was recently in Tunisia, for instance, exactly trying to see if there is any possibility to avoid an Egyptian-like, let's say, story, even if everybody knows that the army in Tunisia is not the army in Egypt, so I don't want to go into these details that everybody knows, but just to see if it was possible to convince them or help them to find to a transitional position, et cetera, et cetera. And again, you can see that another party, for instance, one of the problems they have even to agree on a transition is that they want sort of reassurance that they will not face the same fate as the Muslim Brothers, which is a reassurance that, quote unquote, almost nobody can provide except the Tunisian itself and their allies on the other way. So in all this, I just made this long story just to explain to you how, even if we are united, even if when we have a common position, the fact is that we are not the only or the most important actors in some, let's say, part of the world in crisis or in fighting. But that doesn't mean that we have no influence. We should also resist the temptation of saying, well, we are not the big players, so better to look inside and deal with our problems and try to concentrate in internal issue and etc. I think it's the other way around. I think exactly that the changes in the power equilibrium in the world should push Europe to a more inventive policy and to try to see what we really can invent to contribute as much as possible. And this, I think it's important because I see around on many actors, colleagues, and etc., the temptation of saying, well, we are not the biggest power, we are not the biggest player, so, quote unquote, it's useless that we try. And I think the opposite way is that because we have diminished leverage or we have to be more inventive and try more, not less. This position is not exactly very popular. I leave aside the fact that some member states, they are used to think that they go it alone, and they are member of the Security Council, they have their own foreign policy, and sometimes they are using, let's say, the European meetings of foreign minister to push their agenda, which is quite distressing and also, let's say, makes some people nervous in the sense that sometimes it's clear that they have taken their own position in some capitals and then they find quite normal to push their agenda on the table of the 28, and at the end calling for a European unity or solidarity. And I'm trying to repeat that solidarity is a process. It's not that you start your own business and then somebody else collect the pieces. Solidarity is a process, and it starts at the beginning, not at the end of a few weeks of negotiation or irritants. But in any case, If that is the situation, I think we have 2 points in front of us. Due also to the economic and financial crisis, I think that one way or another, people have come to terms that Europe, as it is now, institutionally speaking, it's simply not up to the job. And that it has been a fantastic success story. If you just look back 50 years, it's the most innovative project if you look worldwide. I don't see any other aggregation coming to this element of depth, but also a common understanding that we have to move forward because it's the only alternative to the populist, let's say, or demagogic call to go back nationalistic, which is a story and experience that we have already faced and that it's better not to be back. So now there is a sort of a political space which is in some way, if we have to move forward institutionally speaking, what kind of framework do you have in mind? And here again you have the three positions. You have some position of some member states who say Europe is enough as a single market, that's it. Then you have the others who say we have to go forward toward the political union, all right, but they see it in a sort of intergovernmental framework, which is very difficult because the intergovernmental framework lacks the check and balance of accountability and the democratic legitimacy. If you want a common defense policy, for instance, I cannot imagine that you give such a competence to whoever in Brussels without a sort of control and accountability to, let's say, the parliament or to whom. So if you want to give more power or competence to Europe, you have also to increase the question of democratic legitimacy. Which brings me to the other option, which I'm trying to push. Again, it's not very popular, which is an idea that of a federal Europe. Now, let me just clarify two things. When I think of a federal Europe and to make me understood by people, and I use the United States of Europe, it's exactly because I want to be understood. And the fact that a federal organization is not so unknown to Europeans. It's not so difficult or not unknown in Germany, it's not unknown in Canada, it's not unknown in other member states. So it's not, and frankly, I don't have any resistance in using the F word, the federalist word. But apparently, again, even as soon as you use the federalist word, you are labeled in somebody or a word which is in between a sin and a crime. And you don't know, and you say, no, I'm simply a federalist. I mean, but again, I am a federalist out of emotion and out of conviction. Others are becoming federalists out of need. Okay, I don't want to discuss the motivation. Whatever the motivation, it doesn't change very much. And the question is very simple to me. I don't see worldwide any other system who can provide democracy, accountability, differences as we are. We are 450 million people with different history, different language, even different, let's say, and I don't see any other system that has proven, it's not theoretical, but it exists already, that with all the limits, nothing is perfect in no fields, not even in politics, evidently, that can combine together democracy, accountability, and differences, and diversity. And diversity is a very important element in Europe. Normally it's considered to be, let's say, an obstacle. I see it well managed as an asset. And I really don't, I'm not dreaming of a Europe in which everybody is, let's say, the same. Not only it's impossible, but I'm not even sure it's desirable. On the contrary. But how you manage diversity, this can be let's say, a problem. And again, when I'm talking of federal Europe, or what I call it a light federation, I'm not talking of a big state. By the way, the only big state I know of are the national one. They are the one who deal with 30, 40, 50% of GNP, and they are the one. So when I talk of a federal light Europe, it's just putting together the policy that are more effective if done at a European scale. So evidently, foreign policy, the defense policy, infrastructure, or maybe research. Definitely, I would say also civil rights and integration. I don't want to dwell here in our problem of immigration and demographic decline and et cetera, but yes, this is another challenge that Europe has to face. So this is where we stand, and even if we try to be, as a government, very active at the G20 or whenever we can, at the G8, et cetera, I think that one of the best contributions we can possibly provide to a global governance is to make Europe a more solid political actor with no, I don't know, the ambition of, but providing ourselves with the tool to take our part of responsibility and to play as a part of our responsibility as not the only actor, not even eventually the most important one, but one of the actors with rights and also responsibility. So this is, let's say, the lines we are taking or pushing forward. And I'm pleased to the fact that many of your think tank and research centers are providing us with food for thought. It's not an easy appeal. For people, could be easier, but it is demagogic, and so it's not out of a political responsibility to say we go back to the national framework. Karl Popper told us many years ago, that when a crisis comes, people tend to become internally involved and tend to look at the most near authority to find solution to their problem, be it the mayor, be it the whatever. So when the situation is in crisis, people tend to become introverted. And I think that our responsibility is, on the contrary, to make them understand that interdependence is exactly the new scheme that we have to face. And interdependence and complexity, evidently, they go hand in hand. That is exactly what we are called to face, and I hope that with the help also of your study, research, and debates, we can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.